The words hit me like a slap. Laura, the bistro's gone. Mom and Dad gave it to me. Clara stood in the doorway of Bennett's Bistro, her tailored suit gleaming under the Denver dusk, her voice dripping with triumph. At 34, Laura Bennett, head nurse at Denver Community Hospital, stood frozen in my apron, the scent of rosemary and betrayal thick in the air. The bistro, my sanctuary, my grandmother's legacy, where I poured my heart into community suppers after grueling shifts, was being ripped away. Clara, my sister, 2 years younger and always the golden child, smirked as she twisted the knife. They think I'll run it better, she added, her fingers twitching on her watch, a nervous tick betraying her polish. I gripped the counter, my knuckles whitening against the worn wood of our family's restaurant in suburban Denver. The bistro wasn't just a business, it was my grandmother's laughter, her peach cobbler recipe, the heart of our community. I'd spent years keeping it alive, unpaid, while Clara chased her corporate law career. They didn't tell me, I said, my voice steady despite the rage coiling inside. Clara's eyes flicked to the door, avoiding mine. They didn't want to upset you, she said, the lie as brittle as the cracked glass frame I'd found behind the spice rack that morning. It held my grandmother's peach cobbler recipe card, my name scrawled on the back in my mother's handwriting, with a smudged, frantic note, "Don't ask Clara." Beneath it, a faint mark, LH. My chest tightened. Why hide this? Who was L? Esh? The community supper was hours away, neighbors expecting the warmth of our family's recipes, but Clara's words turned it to ash. My parents, Ellen and Richard, had always favored Clara, her ambition, her charm. I'd been the responsible one, the one who stayed, who nursed the bistro through lean years. Yet they handed it to her without a word to me? The betrayal cut deeper than I could name, a wound festering beneath my nurse's calm. I studied Clara, her polished facade cracking under my gaze. That nervous tick, the way her hand hovered near her watch, it wasn't just guilt. She was hiding something bigger. I turned to the recipe box, my fingers brushing the cracked glass frame. The note, "Don't ask Clara," felt like a warning from my mother, written in a moment of panic. Elesh. Could it be a person? A secret? The bistro's walls, lined with photos of Sunday suppers, seemed to close in, their warmth mocking me. Clara shifted, her heels clicking on the hardwood. "You should be happy for me," she said, her voice sharper now, defensive. "You're just the nurse, Laura. You don't need this place." The word stung, but I didn't flinch. I'd learned to read people, patients, families, through years of hospital shifts. Clara's bravado was a mask, and I'd tear it off. I stepped closer, my eyes locking on hers. "Why you, Clara? What did they pay you to keep quiet?" Her breath hitched, her hand flying to her watch. For a moment, panic flashed in her eyes, raw and unguarded. "You don't know what you're talking about," she snapped, but her voice trembled. She turned to leave, her heels echoing, but I caught the glint of a silver locket at her throat, one I hadn't seen since 2005, tucked in my mother's jewelry box. It wasn't hers. "Where'd you get that locket?" I called. She froze, then hurried out without answering. The door slammed, leaving me in the silent kitchen, the recipe card smudged ink burning in my mind. I sank into a chair, the weight of the betrayal settling in. My parents' silence, Clara's smugness, the hidden note, they were pieces of a puzzle I'd been too trusting to see. I thought of 2005, when I was 17, Clara 15, the summer she vanished for weeks to a camp while I ran the bistro's kids' cooking classes, dreaming of med school. Something had happened then, something they'd buried. The locket, the note, LH, they were clues to a lie that had shaped my life. My mother's handwriting, usually so precise, was frantic, as if she'd been afraid. Of Clara? Of me finding out. I opened the bistro's ledger, my nurse's precision kicking in. If Clara was hiding something, the books might hold answers. My parents kept meticulous records, every expense in my mother's neat script. I flipped to 2018, the year Clara bought her sleek Denver loft, a purchase I'd never understood. My eyes caught on a line, consulting fee, C. Bennett, $95,000. Clara's initials. The bistro had been struggling, new competition, a failing oven. Why pay a lawyer with no restaurant experience 6 figures? I checked the bank records, my heart pounding. 3 wire transfers to Clara, labeled consulting, but the first was backdated, the ink a shade darker, like Clara's sharp loops. My stomach twisted. She'd tampered with the books. Then, tucked in the recipe binder, I found a folded note, "See, keep it quiet. For the family. July 18th. Not my mother's handwriting, Clara's. July 2018, the same month as the first payment. She'd written it to herself, or someone had forced her to. The $95,000 wasn't for consulting. It was hush money. For what? The locket, the note, L.H. They pointed to 2005, a year my parents had glossed over, a year I'd been too busy to question. I'd been the good daughter, the one who stayed, while Clara got the rewards. My med school fund, my dreams, had been sacrificed for their secrets. I closed the ledger, my hand steady despite the storm inside. The community supper loomed, neighbors expecting my grandmother's cobbler, but I couldn't face them yet. I slipped the recipe card into my pocket, its cracked frame a reminder of my fractured family. Clara's locket, her nervous tick, the forged note, they were cracks in her story, and I'd pry them open. My parents thought they could erase me from the bistro, from the truth. They were wrong. I'd spent years reading patients, spotting lies in their eyes, their vitals. Now, I'd read my family. The bistro was my home, my legacy, and I'd fight for it. For me, that night, in my apartment above the bistro, I sat with the recipe card, tracing the smudged ink. "Don't ask Clara" wasn't just a warning, it was a confession. LH could be a child, a secret, a name tied to the lie that had cost me everything. I thought of my grandmother, her warm hands guiding mine as we baked, her belief in me. She'd never have let this happen. The bistro's warmth, its recipes, were hers, not Clara's. I wouldn't let them steal it. Clara's locket, the $95,000, the forged note, they were threads in a web of lies, and I'd unravel them, one by one. If your family handed your legacy to someone else, what would you do? Share below, I need to know I'm not alone. Clara's words still burned. My parents had handed her the bistro, my grandmother's legacy, as if my years of sacrifice meant nothing. I stood in the cramped office of Bennett's Bistro, the scent of old recipe books and betrayal clogging the air. My nurse's instincts, honed from years at Denver Community Hospital, screamed that Clara's smugness hid something darker. The cracked recipe card, tucked in my pocket with its frantic note, "Don't ask Clara," and the cryptic L.H. was a warning I couldn't ignore. I needed answers, and the bistro's records, my parents' meticulous shrine to every penny spent, were my starting point. I pulled the 2018 ledger from the shelf, its leather cover worn from my mother's fastidious hands. Clara's new loft that year, a glass and steel monstrosity in downtown Denver, had always puzzled me. The bistro was barely breaking even, new competitors, a dying oven, yet there it was, a line in my mother's neat script: consulting fee, C. Bennett, $95,000. Clara's initials. My pulse hammered. A lawyer with no restaurant experience, paid 6 figures? I flipped to the bank records, my fingers trembling. 3 wire transfers to Clara, each labeled consulting, but the first, dated July 2018, was inked in a darker shade, its loops sharp and deliberate, like Clara's handwriting, not my mother's. The date was backdated, a clumsy forgery. My stomach twisted. This wasn't a mistake, it was a cover-up. I sank into the creaky chair, the ledger open before me. Clara's loft, her sleek car, her polished life, it was built on this? I'd been 30 then, working double shifts, pouring every spare hour into the bistro's community suppers, unpaid, while my parents called me selfless. Selfless, while they funneled $95,000 to my sister? The bistro's warmth, its Sunday suppers filled with my grandmother's recipes, felt like a lie. I traced the forged date, my nurse's precision spotting the fraud as clearly as a spiked fever. Clara had tampered with the books, but why? What was she hiding? Digging deeper, I found a folded note tucked inside my mother's recipe binder, hidden among yellowed pages of cobbler and stew. The paper was crisp, newer than the rest, with Clara's sharp script: "See, keep it quiet. For the family." July 18th. My breath caught. July 2018, the same month as the first transfer. Not my mother's handwriting, Clara's. Had she written it to herself, or was someone else pulling her strings? The phrase, "keep it quiet," echoed. The recipe card's warning, linking the $95,000 to a secret my parents wanted buried. I thought back to 2005, when Clara vanished for weeks to a supposed camp, while I, 17 and dreaming of med school, kept the bistro running. The timing wasn't random. The money, the note, LH, they all pointed to that summer. My mind raced, piecing together fragments. Clara's nervous tick at the watch, her quick exit when I mentioned the locket, it wasn't just guilt. She was scared. Of what? Exposure? Or someone else? I checked the ledger again, scanning earlier years. In 2005, a vague entry, miscellaneous, $30,000. No details, no initials, just my mother's script. My savings, the fund I'd built for med school, had been $30,000 that year. I'd thought it was lost to a bad investment my father made. Had they used it for Clara? The betrayal cut deeper, a blade twisting in an old wound. My dreams, my future, sacrificed for her secrets. The bistro's office felt suffocating, its walls lined with photos of happier times, my grandmother teaching me to knead dough, Clara grinning as a kid, before her polish and lies. I pushed the ledger aside, my hand steady despite the storm inside. My parents had always favored Clara, the charming lawyer, while I, the nurse, was expected to stay quiet, to serve. But I wasn't their pawn anymore. I slipped the note into my pocket with the recipe card, their inked secrets heavy against my heart. The community supper was tomorrow, and I'd have to face the neighbors, their smiles, their trust in our families. Legacy. But tonight, I was hunting. I stepped into the kitchen, the heart of the bistro, where my grandmother's spirit lingered in every recipe. The spice rack, where I'd found the cracked recipe card, seemed to whisper. I checked it again, hoping for more clues, but found only dust and the faint scent of rosemary. Clara's locket, the one I'd seen in my mother's jewelry box in 2005, flashed in my mind. Why was she wearing it now? Was it tied to LH? I needed to confront her, but not yet. She'd dodge, deflect, like always. Instead, I'd dig deeper, starting with the bistro's records, my parents' perfect facade of honesty. If Clara had forged one entry, there'd be more. I pulled another ledger, 2017, the year before the payments. A small receipt caught my eye, stapled to a page, legal fees, C. Bennett, $5,000. Clara again. Legal fees for what? The bistro had no lawsuits then. My mind flashed to her panicked eyes when I mentioned the locket. Was she covering something? From before the $95,000? I jotted down the dates, my nurse's habit of charting every detail kicking in. Each clue, recipe card, forged entry, cryptic note, was a stitch in a wound I'd been ignoring too long. My family thought they could bury their lies, but I'd spent years reading patients, spotting truths in their silences. Clara's silence was loudest of all. The phone buzzed, a text from my mother. Laura, we need to talk about the bistro. Come home tomorrow. Home. The word felt hollow. My mother, the woman who raised me, had scrawled that warning about Clara, yet handed her the bistro. My father, the man who stayed silent, had let it happen. Their favoritism wasn't new, but this was theft. Of my legacy, my trust, my life. I didn't reply. Instead, I locked the office, the ledger under my arm. The bistro's warmth, once my refuge, now felt like a stage for their lies. I'd keep the supper going, smile for the neighbors, but I was done playing the good daughter. Upstairs, in my apartment above the bistro, I spread the ledger and notes on the table. The $95,000, the forged date, Clara's note, they weren't just about money. They were about control, about a secret my parents paid to bury. LH could be a person, a child, a key to 2005. I thought of Clara's locket, its glint in the kitchen light. It wasn't just jewelry, it was a clue, maybe a confession. My parents thought they could erase me, but I'd learned to read vitals under pressure, to spot lies in a glance. I'd find the truth, not for them, but for me. For the bistro. For my grandmother's memory, the community supper loomed, a performance I'd have to give while carrying this weight. I'd serve the cobbler, smile, but my eyes would be on Clara. On every nervous tick, every slip. She thought she'd won, that the bistro was hers. But I'd spent years saving lives in the ER, keeping calm when everything collapsed. This was my fight now, and I'd play it smart. The recipe card, the forged entry, the locket, they were my weapons, and I'd wield them carefully. My family's lies had ruled me too long. It was time to rewrite the story. The bistro's ledger lay heavy in my hands, its forged entry and Clara's cryptic note, C, keep it quiet. For the family. July 18th, proof of a betrayal deeper than I'd imagined. I stood in the kitchen of Bennett's Bistro, the scent of rosemary now sour with deceit. My parents had paid Clara $95,000, and the backdated ink screamed her complicity. The community supper was tonight, neighbors expecting my grandmother's cobbler, but my mind was on that note, the recipe card's warning, don't ask Clara, and the mysterious LH. I needed more than numbers to unravel this. I needed the truth. After locking the office, I moved to the bistro's storage room, a dusty corner where my mother kept old files and keepsakes. If Clara's forgery hid a secret tied to 2005, there had to be more clues. I sifted through boxes, my nurse's precision guiding my hands, until I found a locked drawer in an old desk, its key long gone. I pried it open with a butter knife, the wood splintering under my resolve. Inside was an envelope, yellowed and unsealed, addressed to me in my father's blocky handwriting. No stamp, no date. My heart thudded as I pulled out a single sheet. Dated 2005, Laura, I'm sorry. We made a choice to protect Clara. It wasn't fair to you. One day, you'll understand. A line was scratched out, barely legible under the ink, you lost more than you know. The signature's slant didn't match my father's steady hand. It was forged. My knees buckled, but I steadied myself against the desk. 2005, I was 17, Clara 15, the summer she disappeared to camp while I ran the bistros. Kids' cooking classes, my med school dreams burning bright. A choice to protect Clara? What had they done to me? The scratched outline felt like a confession, buried under layers of lies. I traced the forged signature, my nurse's eye-catching. The sharp loops, Clara's handwriting, not my father's. She'd written this, or someone had forced her to. The $95,000, the note in the binder, now this letter, it was all connected, a web spun to keep me in the dark. The bistro's warmth, once my refuge, felt like a cage. I thought of my parents, the man and woman who raised me, always praising Clara's ambition while I was the reliable one, expected to stay, to serve. Had they forged this letter to pacify me, to keep me from asking questions? Or had Clara done it to shift blame? I slipped the letter into my pocket with the recipe card and Clara's note, their weight a reminder of my family's betrayal. The community supper loomed, but I couldn't face the neighbors yet, their smiles blind to the lies beneath our family's legacy. I returned to the kitchen, the heart of the bistro, where my grandmother's recipes had once felt like love. Now, they mocked me. I checked the spice rack again, hoping for another clue, but found only the faint scent of dust. My mind flashed to Clara's locket, the one I'd seen in my mother's jewelry box in 2005, now dangling at my sister's throat. Why had she worn it when she told me the bistro was hers? Was it a taunt, or something deeper? I needed to see her, to watch her eyes when I mentioned 2005, but she dodged me, she always did. Instead, I'd keep digging, alone, where no one could twist the truth. The phone buzzed, a text from Clara, "Stop snooping, Laura. You're making this harder than it needs to be." My blood ran cold. How did she know I was digging? Had she seen me in the office last night, or was someone watching? I didn't reply, my fingers tightening around the letter. Clara's panic, her nervous tick, the forged signature, it wasn't just guilt. She was guarding something my parents had paid her to bury. I thought of 2005, trying to piece together that summer. Clara's camp, my long hours at the bistro, my parents' hushed conversations when they thought I wasn't listening. What had they hidden? I moved to the bistro's front counter, where my grandmother's old recipe box sat, a relic of happier times. I opened it, searching for anything I'd missed. Tucked beneath a stack of faded cards was a photo, curled at the edges, me and Clara, 2005, smiling at a community supper. My mother stood behind us, her hand on Clara's shoulder, her eyes distant. On the back, in my mother's neat script, "Keep her safe." Her? Clara? Or someone else? Elesh? The photo felt like a lie, a staged moment hiding a truth I'd been too young to see. My parents had always favored Clara, but this was more than favoritism. It was sacrifice, and I was the one who'd paid. I slipped the photo into my pocket, my resolve hardening. The bistro's ledger, the forged letter, Clara's note, they were pieces of a puzzle, and I'd been blind to it too long. My parents thought they could erase me, hand Clara the bistro, my legacy, while I played the good daughter. But I'd spent years in the ER, reading patients' lies in their eyes, their vitals. I'd read my family now. The community supper was hours away, and I'd have to serve cobbler, smile, pretend everything was fine. But my mind was elsewhere, calculating, watching. Upstairs, in my apartment above the bistro, I spread the clues on my table, the recipe card, the forged letter, Clara's note, the photo. Each was a wound, a betrayal, but also a weapon. The forged signature, Clara's sharp loops, wasn't just a cover-up, it was a taunt, as if she wanted me to find it. Why else leave it in the bistro, where I'd look? Was she testing me, or was someone else pulling her strings? The $95,000, paid in 2018, felt tied to 2005, to LH, to the locket. My savings, $30,000, gone that same year. Had they used it to silence Clara's mistakes? My dreams of med school, my future, stolen for her. The supper began, neighbors filling the bistro with laughter, oblivious to the storm inside me. I served plates of cobbler, my smile practiced, my nurse's calm a shield. But my eyes scanned the room, imagining Clara walking in, her locket glinting, her lies unraveling. She didn't come. I overheard a neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, mention my mother. Ellen said Clara's taking over the bistro. Such a smart girl. The word stung, but I kept my face neutral, nodding. Smart. Clara was smart, but not smarter than me. I'd learned to spot lies in the chaos of the ER, and I'd spot hers. As the night wound down, I cleaned the tables, my hands moving on autopilot. The forged letter burned in my pocket, its scratched outline, "You lost more than you know," a riddle I couldn't solve yet. Lost what? My savings? My dreams? Or something bigger? LH wasn't just initials, it was a person, a secret, a key to the lie that had shaped my life. I locked the bistro, the silence heavy. Clara thought she could scare me off with a text. But she'd misjudged me. My parents thought they could bury the truth, but I'd dig until it bled. The bistro was mine, my grandmother's legacy, and I'd fight for it. For me, the forged letters scratched out words, "You lost more than you know," burned in my mind, Clara's sharp loops mocking me from the page. I stood in Bennett's bistro, the clatter of last night's supper still echoing, but the warmth of my grandmother's legacy felt like a lie. My parents had chosen Clara, paid her $95,000, while I, the nurse who kept this place alive, was left with nothing but questions. The recipe card, the forged ledger entries, the cryptic note, each clue pointed to 2005, a year my family had buried. I needed someone who knew that summer, someone outside their web of lies. Evelyn Carter, a retired nurse who'd worked with me at Denver Community Hospital, was my only lead. I found Evelyn at a quiet diner across town, her silver hair catching the morning light through the window. She'd been my mentor in my early years, her sharp eyes missing nothing, even now at 62. I slid into the booth, the forged letter and recipe card heavy in my pocket. "Evelyn, I need to know about 2005, I said, my voice low, steady, despite the storm inside. Her gaze sharpened, her coffee cup pausing mid-air. "You're digging into that summer?" she asked, her tone cautious, like she was measuring my resolve. I nodded, sliding the recipe card across the table. "It's 'Don't Ask Clara,' scrawled in my mother's frantic hand." Evelyn's face tightened, and I knew she held a piece of the puzzle. 2005 was a bad year, Evelyn began, her voice dropping to a whisper. "There was a fight at a bar near the bistro. Clara was there, underage, causing a scene, drunk, loud, starting trouble. You were blamed, Laura. Word spread you'd been the instigator, that you'd been out of control." My chest tightened. A memory flickering, me at 17, working late at the bistro, not at any bar. "I wasn't there," I said, my voice flat, my nurse's calm holding me together. Evelyn nodded, her eyes softening. "I know. But your parents let the rumor spread. Said it was better for the family's reputation if it was you, not Clara. You were at the hospital that night, unconscious. They never explained why." "Unconscious?" The word hit like a punch. I gripped the table, my mind racing back to 2005. I'd woken up in the hospital, groggy, my parents claiming I'd fainted from stress. I'd believed them, too busy with the bistro and my med school dreams to question it. But unconscious at the hospital, while Clara's mess was pinned on me. The betrayal cut deeper, a wound I hadn't known was there. Evelyn leaned forward, her voice barely audible. "I was on shift that night. You weren't just stressed, Laura. You were out cold, like you'd been drugged. Your parents were there, whispering with the doctor, insisting it was nothing. I never bought it." Drugged. The word sank in, heavy, sharp. My parents, the man and woman who raised me, had let me take the fall for Clara's chaos, then covered up something worse. My hands trembled, but I kept them folded, my nurse's discipline keeping me from unraveling. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice colder than I meant. Evelyn sighed, her eyes heavy with regret. "You were a kid, Laura, barely 17. I tried to ask your mother, but she shut me down, said it was a family matter. I was just a nurse, not family. I let it go. I shouldn't have." The diner's hum faded, the world narrowing to Evelyn's words. Clara's bar fight, my hospital stay, the rumor that painted me as the reckless one, it was all a lie, orchestrated to protect Clara. But why? What was so damning that they'd drug me, blame me, and bury it? LH, the initials on the recipe card, flashed in my mind. Was it a person? A child? Tied to the $95,000, the forged letter, Clara's locket? I leaned back, my mind charting the clues like a patient's vitals. Evelyn watched me, her expression a mix of pity and respect. "You're stronger than they think," she said. "But be careful. Your sister, she's not the only one hiding something." I left the diner, Evelyn's warning ringing in my ears. The bistro was a short drive away, but I couldn't face it yet. I pulled over in a quiet lot, the forged letter in my hands. Clara's signature, her note, "Keep it quiet," and now this. I'd been unconscious, drugged, while my parents rewrote my life to shield her. The rumor about the bar fight had followed me for years, whispers from neighbors, sidelong glances. I'd thought it was just small-town gossip, but it was a lie they'd let fester to save Clara's reputation. My med school fund, $30,000, gone that same year. Was it part of the cover-up? I drove to the bistro, my hands steady on the wheel, my nurse's calm a shield. The kitchen greeted me with its familiar scents, rosemary, flour, my grandmother's ghost. But it wasn't home anymore. It was a battlefield. I checked the recipe box again, desperate for another clue, but found only a faded napkin with my grandmother's handwriting, "For Laura, my heart." The word stung, a reminder of what I was fighting for. Clara had the bistro, but I had the truth, piece by piece. I slipped the napkin into my pocket with the other clues, their weight grounding me. My phone buzzed, a voicemail from Clara. "Laura, stop asking questions. You're digging up things better left alone. Her voice was sharp, but there was a tremor, a crack in her polish. She was scared, and that fear was my leverage. I didn't call back. Instead, I opened the bistro's ledger again, scanning for anything tied to 2005. A new entry caught my eye: medical expenses, $2,500, Denver Community Hospital. No name, no details, just my mother's script. My hospital stay? Or something else? I jotted it down, my nurse's habit of tracking every detail kicking in. The clues were piling up: recipe card, forged letter, Clara's note, Evelyn's story, and they all pointed to a secret my family had buried at my expense. The bistro's next supper was tomorrow, and I'd have to face the neighbors again. Their smiles oblivious to the lies. But I was done playing the good daughter. My parents had sacrificed me to protect Clara, and she'd played along, forging letters, taking money, wearing that locket like a trophy. I thought of Evelyn's words: you were drugged. My body, my reputation, my dreams, all stolen to keep their secret. LH was the key, and I'd find it, no matter how deep they'd buried it. I locked the bistro, the silence heavy. Clara's voicemail, Evelyn's revelation, the forged signature, they were threads in a web, and I'd tear it apart. Upstairs, in my apartment, I spread the clues on my table: the recipe card, the letter, Clara's note, the napkin. Each was a wound, but also a weapon. My parents thought they could erase me, but I'd spent years in the ER, reading lies in patients' eyes, their vitals. I'd read my family now. Clara's fear, her forged signature, wasn't just guilt, it was a crack in their story. I'd keep digging, not for them, but for me. For the bistro. For the truth my grandmother would have wanted me to find. The next supper would be my stage, and I'd play my part, but my eyes would be on the shadows, waiting for Clara's next slip. Evelyn's words: drugged, unconscious, blamed for Clara's chaos, cut deeper than any scalpel, exposing a wound I'd carried since 2005. I stood in Bennett's bistro, the faint scent of rosemary now laced with betrayal, my pockets heavy with clues: the recipe card, the forged letter, Clara's cryptic note. My parents had let me take the fall, tarnished my name to protect my sister, and I'd been too trusting to see it. The bistro, my grandmother's legacy, was slipping through my fingers, but I wasn't done. Clara's voicemail, warning me to stop digging, only fueled me. Her fear was my leverage, and I'd use it. I needed to face her, to see the locket she wore, the one from my mother's jewelry box, and find out what she was hiding. I tracked Clara to her downtown Denver loft, its glass walls gleaming like her polished lies. She opened the door, her tailored suit crisp, but her eyes flickered with unease. "Laura, what do you want?" she asked, her hand brushing the silver locket at her throat. The sight of it stopped me cold: delicate, heart-shaped, the same one I'd seen in 2005, tucked away in my mother's things. I stepped inside, my nurse's calm keeping my voice steady. "That locket," I said, my eyes locked on hers. "Where did you get it?" Her fingers froze on the chain, her breath catching, a crack in her armor. "It's just a gift," she snapped, but her voice wavered. "From who?" I pressed, stepping closer. "From Mom," she said, too quickly, her hand dropping to her watch, that nervous tick betraying her. "Mom doesn't give gifts like that," I said, my voice low, cutting. "And you weren't wearing it last week. Why now?" Clara's gaze darted to the floor, her polish crumbling. "You're obsessed, Laura. It's just a locket." But her fingers lingered on it, and I saw it, a faint engraving, barely visible in the loft's harsh light: Lily. My heart thudded. Lily. Elesh? The initials from the recipe card. Was it a coincidence, or the key to everything? "Who's Lily?" I asked, my voice sharp enough to slice through her lies. Clara's face paled, her hand clutching the locket like a lifeline. "No one," she stammered. "Just a name. It doesn't mean anything." But her eyes, wide with panic, told a different story. I didn't back down, my nurse's instinct reading her like a patient's chart. "You're lying, Clara. The locket, the $95,000, the forged letter, why are you so scared?" Her breath hitched, and for a moment, I thought she'd break, spill the truth. Instead, she straightened, her lawyer's mask sliding back into place. "You're chasing ghosts, Laura. Let it go. The bistro's mine now. Move on." But her voice trembled, and the locket glinted as she turned away, dismissing me. I caught her wrist, gentle but firm. I saw the engraving. "Lily. Who is she?" Clara yanked her arm free, her eyes flashing with something raw: guilt, fear, maybe both. "Get out," she hissed, but her hand stayed on the locket, protecting it. I left, her words echoing, but that name, Lily, burned in my mind. The locket wasn't just jewelry, it was a secret, tied to my mother, to 2005, to the lies that had cost me my dreams. I drove back to the bistro, my hand steady on the wheel, my mind racing. The community supper was tomorrow, and I'd have to face the neighbors, their smiles blind to the truth. But Clara's panic, her lie about the locket being a gift, was a crack in her story. My mother, the woman who raised me, had kept that locket hidden for years. Why give it to Clara now? Did she know about Lily? Was she part of the cover-up? In the bistro's kitchen, I pulled out the clues from my pocket, the recipe card with LH, the forged letter, Clara's note, the napkin from my grandmother. I added a new note, Lily, locket engraving. The pieces were forming a picture, but it was still blurry. I thought back to 2005, trying to recall my mother's face that summer. She'd been distant, her eyes red-rimmed, always whispering with my father when they thought I wasn't listening. I'd been too busy, too trusting, to question it. Now, I saw it, her guilt, her silence, her role in whatever they'd done. To me. I checked the bistro's storage room again, desperate for anything tying my mother to the locket. In a box of old receipts, I found a jewelry store slip from 2005, tucked under a pile of menus. Custom locket, heart-shaped, engraved, Lily. Paid by E. Bennett. My mother's initials. My breath caught. She'd bought it, had it engraved. The same year I was drugged, blamed for Clara's mess. Was Lily a person? A child? The secret they'd buried at my expense? The $95,000, the forged letter, the hospital stay, all of it pointed to something bigger, something my mother had orchestrated. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother, Laura, come to the house tonight. We need to talk. The words felt like a trap, but I couldn't ignore it. My mother, the woman who'd scrawled, don't ask Clara, knew more than she'd let on. I didn't reply, my mind already plotting. I'd go, but not as the good daughter. I'd go as the nurse who'd learned to read lies in a glance, who'd spent years saving lives under pressure. The bistro's warmth, once my refuge, was now a stage for their deceit. I'd play my part, smile at the supper, but my eyes would be on Clara, on my mother, waiting for the next crack. Upstairs, in my apartment above the bistro, I spread the clues on my table, the locket's engraving now the centerpiece. Lily. The name felt alive, a pulse in the web of lies. Clara's fear, her lie about the locket, wasn't just guilt, it was a confession she couldn't voice. My mother's role, buying the locket, hiding it, giving it to Clara, was no accident. They'd stolen more than my savings, my reputation, they'd stolen a truth I was only beginning to see. I thought of my grandmother, her warm hands guiding mine as we baked, her belief in me. She'd never have let this happen. The bistro was hers, mine, and I'd fight for it. For Lily, whoever she was, the supper loomed, but I was ready. I'd serve cobbler, laugh with neighbors, but my mind would be sharp, watching, waiting. Clara's locket, my mother's text, the clues piling up, they were weapons, and I'd wield them carefully. My family thought they could bury me, but I'd spent years in the ER, spotting truths in chaos. I'd spot theirs. The locket wasn't just a gift, it was a key, and I'd unlock the truth, no matter how deep they'd hidden it. The locket's engraving, Lily, burned in my mind, a name tied to my mother's secrets and Clara's fear. I stood in Bennett's bistro, the kitchen's warmth tainted by the weight of my clues, the recipe card, the forged letter, the jewelry receipt. My parents had drugged me, blamed me, and buried a truth that cost me everything, all to protect Clara. My mother's text, summoning me to the house, still hung unanswered, a trap I'd face later. I needed someone who saw 2005 clearly, someone who wasn't family. Jake Hargrove, a former patient I'd cared for at Denver Community Hospital, had been around that summer, a regular at the bistro before his life unraveled. He was my next move. I found Jake at a rundown auto shop on the edge of town, his hands stained with grease, his eyes heavy with years of pain. He'd been a mechanic in 2005, a quiet man who'd lingered at the bistro's counter, always tipping generously. I approached him as he wiped his hands on a rag, his gaze wary but softening when he recognized me. Laura, been a while, he said, his voice rough. You hear about the bistro? I shook my head, my nurse's calm keeping me steady. I need to know about 2005, Jake. What happened with Clara? What you saw? His jaw tightened, and he looked away, the rag twisting in his hands. That's a bad year to dig up, he muttered, but he didn't walk away. We sat on a bench outside the shop, the hum of traffic a low drone. Clara was in trouble, Jake began, his voice low, like he was confessing. She was 15, reckless, sneaking into bars. That night at the Roadhouse, she was drunk, fighting with some guy. Everyone thought it was you, Laura. Your parents spread that story, said you were the wild one, not her. My chest tightened, Evelyn's words echoing, blamed for Clara's chaos. I wasn't there, I said, my voice flat, controlled. Jake nodded, his eyes meeting mine. I know. I saw you at the bistro, working late, same as always. But Clara, she was pregnant. Scared out of her mind. Your parents showed up at the bar, took her away. Next day, you were in the hospital, out cold. Pregnant. The word hit like a shockwave, rearranging every clue. Clara, pregnant at 15, while I was drugged, unconscious, my reputation trashed to cover for her. My hands clenched, but I kept my face neutral, my nurse's discipline holding me together. Why blame me? I asked, my voice ablaze. Jake's eyes dropped, his shoulders sagging. Your parents said it was for the family. Clara was their golden girl, headed for law school. You were the strong one, Laura. They knew you'd take the hit and keep going. His words were a knife, twisting deeper. My med school dreams, my savings, my name, all sacrificed for Clara's future. And Lily? Was she the child? I leaned forward, my gaze locked on Jake's. What happened to the baby? His face crumpled, a flash of guilt or shame. I don't know the whole story, he said, his voice breaking. After that night, Clara was gone for months. Camp, they called it. When she came back, she was different, quiet, polished, like nothing happened. But I heard whispers. Your parents paid to make it disappear. They didn't want anyone asking questions. He paused, his eyes distant. I wanted to tell you, Laura. But your father, he cornered me, said if I talked, I'd lose everything. I was weak back then. I'm sorry. The apology stung, but it wasn't Jake I blamed. My parents, the man and woman who raised me, had orchestrated this, drugged me, spread lies, erased a child's existence to protect Clara. Lily. The locket's engraving, the recipe cards LH, it wasn't a coincidence. Was she Clara's daughter, hidden away? Or something more? I stood, my mind racing, charting the clues like a patient's vitals. You're telling me now, I said, my voice steady. That's enough. Jake nodded, his eyes heavy with regret. Be careful, Laura. Your family, they'll do anything to keep this buried. I drove back to the bistro, the weight of Jake's words settling in. Clara, pregnant. Me, drugged, blamed. The $95,000, the forged letter, the locket, all pieces of a lie that had stolen my life. The bistro's kitchen greeted me, its rosemary scent now bitter. I pulled out my clues, adding Jake's story to the pile, recipe card, letter, note, receipt, napkin. Each was a wound, but also a weapon. I checked the bistro's ledger again, searching for anything tied to 2005. A faint entry caught my eye, travel expenses, $1,200, July 2005. My mother's script, no details. Clara's, camp? Or something else? I jotted it down, my nurse's precision cataloging every thread. My phone buzzed, a text from Clara, leave Jake alone, Laura. You're digging too deep. My blood ran cold. How did she know I'd seen him? Was she watching, or was someone else feeding her? Her fear was palpable, even through the screen, but I didn't reply. Her panic was my advantage. I thought of my mother's text, still unanswered, urging me to the house. She'd bought the locket, engraved it with Lily's name. She knew. The woman who raised me, who'd called me selfless, had built this lie. The bistro's next supper was tonight, and I'd have to face the neighbors, their smiles blind to the truth. But I was done playing their game. I moved to the bistro's storage room, searching for anything I'd missed. In a dusty box, I found a faded guest book from 2005, filled with signatures from community suppers. One caught my eye, J. Hargrove, thanks for the cobbler. Jake had been there, watching, knowing. Below it, in my mother's handwriting, for the family. The phrase echoed Clara's note, keep it quiet. For the family. It wasn't just a saying, it was their code, their excuse for betraying me. My hands shook, but I steadied them, slipping the guestbook page into my pocket. The bistro, my grandmother's heart, was mine to protect, not theirs to sell. Upstairs, in my apartment, I spread the clues on my table, recipe card, letter, note, receipt, napkin, guestbook page. Lily was the center, a name tying my mother to Clara's secret. Jake's story, Clara's pregnancy, my parents' cover-up, made it clear, they'd sacrificed me to save her. My hospital stay, my lost savings, the rumors, all part of their plan. But why hide a child? Was Lily still out there? I thought of my grandmother, her warm hands guiding mine, her belief in truth. She'd have fought for me. The supper loomed, but I was ready. I'd serve cobbler, smile, but my eyes would be sharp, watching for Clara, for my mother, for any slip. The bistro filled with neighbors, their laughter a stark contrast to the storm inside me. I moved through the crowd, my nurse's calm a shield. My mind on Lily. Clara didn't show, but her text, Jake's guilt, my mother's locket, they were cracks in their story. I overheard a neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, mention my father. Richard said Clara's the future of the bistro. Such a bright girl. The word stung, but I nodded, my smile practiced. Bright. Clara was bright, but I was sharper. I'd spent years in the ER, reading lies in chaos. I'd read theirs. The truth was close, and I'd pull it free, for me, for the bistro, for the name engraved on that locket. Jake's revelation, Clara's pregnancy, my parents' lies, Lily's name, tore through me, each clue a shard of glass in the puzzle of my stolen life. I stood in Bennett's bistro, the scent of flour and betrayal thick in the air, my pockets heavy with evidence, the recipe card, the forged letter, the locket's receipt, the guestbook page. My mother's text, still unanswered, loomed like a challenge, but I wasn't ready to face her yet. Clara's fear, her texts warning me off Jake, only sharpened my resolve. My parents had sacrificed my dreams, my name, to protect her secret, a child, hidden, erased. I needed answers, and the house where I grew up, where my mother and father had woven their lies, was the only place left to look at. I drove to my parents' home, a modest ranch house on the edge of Denver, its faded shutters hiding years of deceit. My mother opened the door, her eyes weary, her smile strained. "Laura, you came," she said, her voice soft, but I caught the tremble, the guilt she couldn't hide. My father stood behind her, his shoulders slumped, the man who'd stayed silent now looking like he carried the weight of his choices. I stepped inside, my nurse's calm a shield, my voice steady. "I know about 2005, I said, my eyes flicking between them. "Clara's pregnancy. The lies you spread about me. Why?" My mother's face paled, her hand gripping the back of a chair, while my father looked away, his jaw tight. "Laura, it's not what you think," my mother began, but I cut her off. Pulling the forged letter from my pocket, its scratched outline, "You lost more than you know," glaring in the dim light. "This letter. Clara forged it, didn't she? To make me blame you, Dad. To keep me chasing shadows." My father's eyes widened, his gaze snapping to the paper. "Clara wrote that?" he asked, his voice hoarse. He reached for it, but I held it back, my stare unrelenting. "You let me take the fall for her. You drugged me, spread rumors, and used my savings, $30,000, to clean up her mess. Tell me the truth. Now." My mother sank into a chair, her hands trembling. "We didn't want to lose her," she whispered, her eyes glistening. "Clara was pregnant, Laura. She was 15, scared, reckless. We couldn't let it ruin her future. You were strong, always so strong. We knew you'd survive the rumors." My father nodded, his voice low. "We sent her away to have the baby. Paid for the adoption. Your savings, we used it to cover the costs. We thought you'd never know." The words hit like a blow, my savings, my med school fund, stolen. To bury Clara's secret. My hands clenched, but I kept my voice cold, precise. "You used my future to save hers. And the child? Who was it?" My mother's eyes dropped, her fingers twisting a napkin. "We don't know where she is now," she said, barely audible. "The adoption was closed. Clara never knew her either." But her voice cracked, and I saw it, the lie in her eyes, the same flicker I'd caught in patience hiding pain. "You're lying," I said, stepping closer. "The locket. You bought it, Mom, engraved with Lily. You gave it to Clara. Why?" Her breath caught, her hand flying to her mouth. My father reached for her, but she waved him off, her face crumpling. "It was a mistake," she whispered. "We thought we were protecting you both." "Protecting me?" The words were a mockery, a final twist of the knife. I pulled out the recipe card, its LH scrawled in her handwriting. "Lily Harper," I said, my voice a blade. "Who is she?" My father's face froze, his eyes darting. "To my mother." "Laura, stop," he said, but there was no authority in his voice, only desperation. My mother stood, her hands shaking. "We did what we had to," she said, her voice breaking. "Clara was falling apart. We paid her to stay quiet, to let it go. The $95,000, it was for her silence, for the family." Silence. The word echoed. Jake's story, Clara's note, their code for burying the truth, but the forged letter, that was Clara's doing, not theirs. I saw it now, her sharp loops, her attempt to shift my anger to my father, to keep me from the truth. "Clara forged the letter to make me doubt you," I said, my gaze locked on my father. "But you're still guilty. You let her take everything, my money, my name, the bistro." My father's eyes glistened, his voice barely a whisper. "I'm sorry, Laura. I thought I was saving us all." "Sorry." The word was hollow, a bandage on a wound too deep to heal. My mother reached for my hand, but I pulled back, my nurse's calm holding me together. "You chose her over me," I said. "But I'm not done." I left the house, their apologies ringing empty, the truth sharper than ever. My savings, $30,000, gone to hide Clara's child. The locket, Lily's name, my mother's guilt, it all pointed to a secret they'd buried at my expense. I drove back to the bistro, the night heavy, my mind charting every detail. In the kitchen, I spread my clues on the counter: recipe card, letter, note, receipt, guestbook page. I added a new note: $30,000, adoption costs, 2005. Clara's forgery wasn't just a trick. It was a desperate move to keep me from Lily. My mother knew more, and I'd make her talk. The bistro's next supper was hours away, but I couldn't face the neighbors yet, their smiles blind to the lies. I checked the storage room again, searching for anything I'd missed. In a locked box, hidden under old menus, I found a bank statement from 2018, the year of the $95,000 payment. My mother's name, not Clara's, was on the account. She'd paid Clara to stay silent, but why then? What had changed? The statement listed a transfer to C. to Bennett, with a memo for Lily. My heart stopped. Lily wasn't just a name, she was real, and my mother had known all along. My phone buzzed, a text from Clara: "Stop, Laura. You're breaking us apart." Her fear was a pulse, beating through the words, but I didn't reply. Her forgery, her silence, her locket, they were cracks in her story, and I'd pry them open. The bistro, my grandmother's legacy, was mine to protect, not theirs to sell. I thought of my grandmother, her warm hands, her trust in me. She'd have fought for the truth. The supper loomed, but I was ready. I'd serve cobbler, smile, but my eyes would be sharp, watching for Clara, for my mother's next lie. Upstairs, in my apartment, I laid out the clues, the bank statement now the centerpiece. My parents had used my savings, paid Clara, hidden a child, all to protect their image, their golden girl. But Clara's forged letter, her panic, showed she wasn't in control. Someone else was pulling strings, and my mother's guilt, her locket, pointed to her. I'd spent years in the ER, reading lies in chaos. I'd read theirs now. The truth about Lily was close, and I'd find her, for me, for the bistro, for the future they stole. My mother's lie, $30,000 of my savings used to hide Clara's child, cut deeper than any betrayal yet, and the bank statement, with her name tied to the $95,000 payment, proved she was still hiding more. I stood in Bennett's bistro, the kitchen's warmth now a hollow echo of my grandmother's legacy, my clues spread before me: recipe card, forged letter, receipt, guestbook page, bank statement. Lily was real, a child my parents had erased. And Clara's forged letter was a desperate attempt to keep me from her. My mother's guilt, her locket, pointed to a truth I couldn't reach alone. I needed the hospital records from 2005, and Dr. Susan Patel, the chief of staff at Denver Community, was my last hope. I found Dr. Patel in her office, her desk cluttered with charts, her eyes sharp despite the late hour. She'd been my supervisor. For years, a woman who saw through excuses with a glance. "Laura, this isn't about a shift change," she said, leaning back, her gaze piercing. I didn't flinch, my nurse's calm holding steady. "I need my records from 2005, I said, my voice low, precise. "The night I was admitted, unconscious." Her brow furrowed, but she didn't question me, just nodded and led me to the hospital's archive room, a maze of dusty files. "You were 17, she said, pulling a folder. I wasn't on shift, but I remember the whispers. "Your parents were insistent it was nothing." She handed me the folder, its edges worn, and I opened it, my hand steady despite the storm. Inside, the pages detailed my admission: unconscious, suspected sedation, no clear cause. But then, a handwritten note, tucked between the lines, in a script I didn't recognize: delivery, female infant, 2005. Mother sedated per family request. My heart stopped. Delivery. Infant. I wasn't just drugged, I'd given birth. And they'd taken her. Lily. My daughter. The room spun, but I gripped the folder, my nurse's discipline anchoring me. "Who authorized this?" I asked, my voice ablade. Dr. Patel's eyes softened, but her voice was firm. "Your parents. They signed everything, Laura. Said it was for your future." Clara was listed as the mother on the adoption papers. Clara, the mother. The $95,000, the locket, the lies, it all snapped into place. My parents had drugged me, taken my child, and given her to Clara to cover their shame. I'd been 17, unconscious, my future stolen in a hospital bed. "There's more," Dr. Patel said, pulling another file. "Clara's been accessing these records since 2017. She tracked the adoption agency, found the child. She didn't tell you, but she's been in contact with her." My blood ran cold. Clara knew Lily, had known for years, while I was left in the dark, blamed for her mess. The betrayal was a physical weight, crushing, but I didn't break. I couldn't. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice steady, though my hands trembled. Dr. Patel sighed, her eyes heavy with regret. I didn't know the whole story, Laura. Your parents were powerful in this town. I was a new doctor, told to stay quiet. But I kept this. She handed me a sealed envelope, my name scrawled in my mother's handwriting. It was in the file, marked for you. I couldn't open it. I took it, my fingers tracing the ink, the weight of it heavier than any clue yet. Inside was a single sheet, my mother's words trembling across the page. Laura, we thought we were saving you. Lily is safe. Forgive us. Forgive. The word was a mockery, a lie as deep as their betrayal. I left the hospital, the folder and envelope clutched tight, my mind racing. Lily was my daughter, taken from me, given to Clara's name to protect the family's image. The $95,000 was my mother's bribe to keep Clara silent, but Clara had found her, kept her from me. My parents had stolen my child, my savings, my life, and Clara had played along, forging letters to keep me chasing shadows. I drove to the bistro, the night heavy, the rosemary scent now bitter. In the kitchen, I added the hospital records and my mother's letter to my clues: recipe card, forged letter, receipt, guest book, bank statement. Each was a wound, but also a weapon. Lily was out there, and Clara knew where. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother. Laura, please. Let's talk. We can fix this. Fix this? They'd taken my daughter, my future, and thought words could mend it. I didn't reply, my mind already plotting. The bistro's next supper was tomorrow, and Clara would be there, her locket gleaming, her lies exposed. I checked the storage room again, searching for anything to confirm Dr. Patel's words. In a forgotten drawer, I found a hospital bracelet, my name, dated 2005. It wasn't mine, it was Lily's, labeled Baby Girl Bennett. My heart cracked, but I tucked it into my pocket, a piece of her I'd never known. I thought of my grandmother, her warm hands guiding mine, her belief in truth. She'd have fought for Lily, for me. The bistro was hers, mine, and now Lily's. Clara's texts, her forgery, her secret contact with my daughter, they were her unraveling. My mother's letter, her guilt, was a confession, but not enough. I needed Lily, and I'd find her. The supper loomed, but I was ready. I'd serve cobbler, smile, but my eyes would be on Clara, waiting for her to crack. I moved to my apartment upstairs, spreading the clues on my table, the hospital bracelet at the center. Lily was my daughter, and they'd stolen her. But I was a nurse, trained to find truth in chaos. I'd find her, no matter the cost. The bistro filled with neighbors, their chatter a distant hum. Clara arrived, her locket glinting, her smile tight. I watched her, my nurse's calm as shield, my mind sharp. Nice locket, I said, my voice low, cutting. Her hand flew to it, her eyes wide with fear. Laura, don't, she whispered, but I leaned closer. I know about Lily, I said, my words a blade. Her face crumpled, and for the first time, I saw not just guilt, but pain. I didn't want to hurt you, she said, her voice breaking. I found her for you. For me? The words were a lie, or maybe a truth I wasn't ready for. I stepped back, my heart pounding, but my resolve ironclad. The truth was mine to claim, and I'd take it back, for Lily, for the bistro, for me. Clara's words at the supper, I found her for you, echoed with a mix of guilt and truth, but they didn't soften the sting of knowing Lily was my daughter, stolen from me in 2005. I stood in Bennett's bistro, the scent of cobbler heavy in the air, my clues, recipe card, forged letter, receipt, guest book, bank statement, hospital records, bracelet, spread like a map of betrayal. Clara had known Lily since 2017, kept her from me, while my parents had orchestrated the lie, drugging me, using my savings, and handing my child to an adoption agency under Clara's name. The bistro, my grandmother's heart, was at stake, and I needed her wisdom to reclaim it. Somewhere, in her things, was the truth, a deed check, a final gift, that would tie me to Lily and secure our future. I searched the bistro's attic, a dusty shrine to my grandmother's life, filled with recipe books and faded photos. In a locked cedar box, hidden under a quilt, I found a leather-bound journal, its pages crisp with her elegant script. It wasn't just a journal, it was her deed check, dated a year before her death. To Laura, my heart, and her child, my legacy. It read, Bennett's Bistro and the trust fund are yours, to share with your daughter, Lily Harper. My breath caught. My grandmother knew. She'd known about Lily, had planned for us, and hidden it to protect me until I was ready. A sealed envelope tucked inside held a key to a safe deposit box, labeled, for Laura and Lily. My hands trembled, but my resolve held. This was her gift, her way of righting my parents' wrong. I drove to the bank, the key heavy in my pocket. My nurse's calm keeping me steady. The safe deposit box held a trust fund deed, $200,000, untouched, meant for me and Lily, and a letter from my grandmother. Laura, it began, your parents made choices, but you are my truth. Find your daughter. The bistro is yours, always. My heart ached, not with pain, but with strength. My grandmother had seen me, believed in me, when my family hadn't. But there was more, a folded note in Lily's handwriting, dated 2017, Mom, Clara told me everything. I kept your letter safe. I'm waiting. My letter. The one-eyed. Written in 2005, delirious, sedated, begging to keep my child. Clara had given it to her, and Lily had stayed silent, protecting me. I tracked Lily to a small art studio in Boulder, guided by Clara's reluctant admission at the supper. She stood there, 17, her eyes like mine, her hands smudged with paint. You're Laura, she said, her voice soft but steady, clutching a worn letter, my letter, the one I'd written to her, unknowing, in a hospital bed. Clara said you'd come. My throat tightened, but I kept my voice even. Why didn't you find me? Lily's eyes glistened. Clara said you weren't ready, that it would hurt you. I wanted to protect you, like you protected me. Protected her? I'd been erased, but she'd carried my words, my love, all these years. I reached for her hand, and she didn't pull away. Back at the bistro, I faced my family one last time. Clara stood, her locket gone, her face raw with regret. I kept her safe for you, she said, her voice breaking. My mother and father stood behind her, their apologies unspoken but heavy in their eyes. We thought we were saving you. My mother whispered, echoing her letter. I didn't flinch. You stole my daughter, I said, my voice cold, precise. But she's mine now, and so is the bistro. I held up the deed check, my grandmother's words a shield. This is mine, and Lily's. You don't get to take it. My father nodded, his shoulders sagging, while Clara's eyes filled with tears. They'd lost, not to my anger, but to the truth. The bistro's next supper was different. Lily stood beside me, her hands learning my grandmother's recipes, her laughter filling the space where lies once lived. My parents sat quietly, their presence a fragile step toward amends. Clara helped in the kitchen, her movements hesitant, her guilt a weight she'd carry. The neighbors ate, unaware of the war I'd fought, but their smiles felt warmer, real. The bistro was mine, Lily was mine, and my grandmother's legacy was whole. I'd faced their lies, their betrayal, and won, not with vengeance, but with truth. Looking back, I see every step, Evelyn's clues, Jake's confession, Dr. Patel's records, my grandmother's deed check, as a battle I didn't choose but couldn't lose. The truth didn't heal the wounds, it sharpened them, made them clear. Families can betray you, not with malice, but with choices they think are love. The lesson isn't forgiveness, it's boundaries. You don't owe your pain to anyone, not even blood. You fight for what's yours, not to prove them wrong, but to claim your right to exist, unbroken. I rebuilt my life, not for them, but for Lily, for the bistro, for the woman I've always been. If your family buried your truth, don't wait for their apologies. Dig it out, hold it tight, and build something they can't touch. Share your story below, I need to know I'm not alone. And if this moved you, subscribe to the channel for the next series. Let's keep telling truths that matter.